back to another episode of A Better Way of Earning, where work, life, leadership, and money come together to help you build success on your own terms. I am your host, Dr. Michelle S. Thomas, and today we're talking about a skill that often determines whether your value is seen, heard, understood, and remembered. That skill, my friends, is communication. Now, when many people hear the word communication, they think about talking. They think about speaking more, sounding impressive, or using the right words in the right room. But communication is much deeper than that. Communication is how people understand your ideas, your value, your confidence, your leadership, and your ability to contribute. And here's why this matters. You may be talented, prepared, experienced, and full of good ideas. But if you cannot communicate those ideas clearly, people may never fully understand what you bring to the table. So today, we're going to challenge the public playbook that says, if I'm good at my job, people will notice. We're going to unpack the success blockers that keep people silent, unclear, or overly dependent on tools. And we're going to talk about how communication becomes career currency because it creates visibility, trust, influence, and opportunity. Let's get started. The public playbook tells us if I'm good at my job, then people will notice. And sometimes they will. There are moments when excellent work speaks loudly. But in many workplaces, good work alone is not always enough. People are busy. Leaders are managing multiple priorities. Opportunities move quickly. And if your value is not communicated clearly, it can remain hidden, even when your contribution is strong. This does not mean that you have to become loud, aggressive, or self promotional in a way that feels unnatural. Trust me, I went down that pathway and that journey. What it does mean is that you have to learn how to make your work visible, your ideas understandable, and your value connected to the needs of the room. Best ideas often remain invisible, not because they're weak, but because they are poorly communicated, communicated too late, or never communicated at all. And if communication is one of the ways our value becomes visible, we also have to talk honestly about what gets in the way. Success blocker number one, fear of speaking up. Fear of speaking up often sounds like my ideas are not important. Someone else probably already thought of this, or I do not want to say the wrong thing. Over time, that fear can train talented people to stay silent in rooms where their insight could absolutely make a difference. Speaking up does not mean speaking over people. It does not mean dominating every conversation. It means learning to contribute with clarity, respect, and confidence when your perspective adds value. Success blocker number two, artificial competence. Now, we talked about this in another episode, but artificial competence shows up when we rely so heavily on AI, templates, scripts, or borrowed language that we lose the ability to communicate directly from our own understanding. Tools were designed to help us organize thoughts, polish a message, or clarify wording. but they should never replace our judgment, our voice, or ability to explain what we mean. If AI writes the email, but you cannot explain the decision, answer the follow up question, or adjust the message for the person in front of you, then the tool produced communication, but it did not build communication skills. Success blocker number three, the dreaded weight of perfectionism. Perfectionism says, I'll wait until I know exactly everything I want to say. But perfect timing rarely arrives, right? Perfect wording rarely appears. And while you're waiting to sound flawless, someone else may be moving the conversation forward with a clear, imperfect contribution. Your goal should not be perfect communication. Your goal should be clear, thoughtful, responsible communication. People do not need every sentence to be polished. They need to understand what you mean, why it matters, and what should happen next. Here's a core question I want you to ask yourself. Why do some people consistently receive opportunities while others with equal talent remain unnoticed? One answer is communication. Not because communication is the only factor, but because communication helps people recognize ability, trust your judgment, understand your ideas, and imagine you in future opportunities. So let's talk about the communication capital model. Communication creates four powerful forms of capital in your career: visibility, influence, trust, and opportunity. Visibility means people can see what you know, what you contribute, and how you think. If your work is hidden, people may underestimate your capacity. Influence means your words help shape understanding, decisions, and direction. Influence is not about manipulation, it is about helping people see what matters and, most importantly, why. Trust grows when your communication is honest, consistent, clear, and directly aligned with your actions. People trust professionals who communicate responsibly, especially when the situation is difficult. And then opportunity. Opportunity follows when people understand your value well enough to recommend you, promote you, invite you into conversations, or trust you with more responsibility. That is why communication is career currency. It helps translate what is inside of you into something other people can recognize and act upon. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Communication is not simply talking, my friends. Communication is helping another person clearly understand your intention, your message, and the meaning behind what you are sharing. You can say a lot and still not communicate well. You can also be quiet, thoughtful, and intentional and communicate with great impact. Effective communication is not measured by your word count, it is measured by understanding. That means before we speak, write, present, lead a meeting, or give feedback, even advocate for ourselves, we need to slow down long enough to ask, what am I trying to help the other person understand? Now, I want to also add in your communication is strengthened When you begin to understand the audiences and the people that you are communicating, even the same idea too. So keep that in mind. How you communicate with the people above you to get an idea passed through or understood may be different than how you communicate with your direct reports or communicate with fellow other leaders or communicate with people that are stakeholders within the business. So I just want to make sure I point that out because oftentimes we create scripts, conversations, and bullet points, famous bullet points. We create that, but we only create one version of it. And if you do that, it narrows your ability to be able to be flexible and understood in different audiences. Does that make sense? Your bullet points may be important. That may be the key for what you're trying to communicate. However, how you communicate those bullet points may need to be updated, refined, or rearranged depending on the person or the people that you're communicating with. So, let's talk about some simple tools that you could use before almost any important conversation. The three questions. Before you communicate, ask yourself these three questions. What do I want them to understand? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? I'm going to say that again. What do I want them to understand? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? Those three questions help you move from simply expressing yourself to communicate with purpose. Do you see how, even with these three questions, the audiences or the people that you are speaking to, those answers to these three questions may vary. So, those three questions help you move from simply expressing yourself to communicating with purpose. If you want someone to understand the problem, feel the urgency, and take action, your message should be built differently than if you want them to feel encouraged, understood, understand progress, and keep going. Make sense? Simple, powerful, and very practical. Let's talk about how clarity wins most of the time. Confused people rarely act. Clear communication creates confidence because people know what is being said, why it matters, and what needs to happen next. Now, I just want to interject in here before we move on. If you find yourself becoming defensive or anxious when people aren't understanding your communication, immediately blame the listener. They don't care. They don't want to hear me. They don't respect me. Record yourself. Record your conversation. Take a moment, take a break, take a beat, and then play it back. If you hear confusion and ambiguity or unclear communication, then work on that. We have to, as human beings, have to get past the point of the immediate urge to become defensive. This is one of the best career learning curves that you can work on. When you get to the point that you don't take everything personal, then you, my friends, will be able to see tangible results of how your actions, your responses, and most importantly, your communication improves. Clarity does not mean oversimplifying everything. It means removing unnecessary confusion. It means choosing words that help people follow your thinking. It means organizing your message so that the listener does not have to work hard to find the point. In your career, clarity can change how people experience you. A clear update builds trust. A clear question saves time. A clear recommendation shows judgment. A clear boundary protects expectations. And a clear story helps people understand your value. Now, let's talk about something extremely important. Communication does not look the same for everyone. Sometimes I've seen in my experience that workplaces tend to reward the loudest voice in the room. But the loudest voice is not always the clearest, wisest, or most valuable voice. Introverts, unlike the misconception that a lot of people have about introverts, they can be excellent communicators. That misconception is often that introverts are too quiet to lead, persuade, or even contribute. I've seen in some meetings where the introvert is in the room, but treated as if they're not. But what you have to understand, especially as a leader in your workplace, that many introverts communicate with depth, preparation, observation, and thoughtfulness. They may need time to process before responding, but that does not mean they lack insight. Let's talk about ambiverts. Now, a lot of people, I was shocked to hear or see that a lot of people don't know what an ambivert is. And so we have kind of, for centuries, navigated between whether you were an introvert or an extrovert. Well, there are ambiverts, and these are people that can move freely between both of those categories. So ambiverts, ambiverts may move freely between social energy and quiet reflection. They can communicate very well in groups, but also need time to recover, reset, and think deeply. Their strength is often adaptability, but they still benefit from environments that do not assume constant availability equals commitment. I personally, for a long time believed, because that's what people told me, that I was an extrovert. It wasn't until I began to study neuroscience and behaviors that I recognized that I actually am a ambivert, because as social as I can be, because I am a heavy thinker, I process a lot, I research a lot, I study a lot, I become exhausted. And I think I talked about this in another podcast episode, but I become exhausted in large crowds for when I'm doing a lot of speaking. And so the team around me has learned that prior to and directly after, I need recovery time. I need a moment so that I can calm down, because again, it's adrenaline. It is all of these endorphins that are filling your body when you're on stages, if you're speaking to people or you're delivering content. And so for me and my mental and physical health, we build in those barriers because if those barriers are not built in, I tend to overexert myself for other people. And I'm not telling you that because it's a woe is me type of thing. I'm telling you that because you may feel like that you are one communication style or personality style. But if you do a little bit more research and spend a little bit more time doing an inventory of what triggers anxieties, when you feel most tired, when are you most effective, and how to create spaces that directly can improve your delivery of and your style of communication, it will really help you to position yourself and again communicate with others around you your clear needs without either avoiding or escaping or being perceived as something that you're not. Okay, let's move on to extroverts. Extroverts may enjoy verbal processing, brainstorming, and outward expression, but there is a difference between talking and communicating. Effective extroverted communicators learn to create space for others, listen with intention, and make sure their energy supports the conversation instead of overwhelming it. Another lesson that I had to learn. I, just because y'all are my friends. So let's talk about it. I came up in an environment that, kids were seen, not heard. And being the analytical researcher kid that I was that but why person that drove my parents crazy. It kept me on a lot of punishments. Let me just tell you. that mouth. Um, and so that need for clarity, that need for understanding often gave me the tendency that when I was outside of the house, I dominated every conversation. I But I didn't realize that. Like, I wasn't doing it because I felt like that I was that important. I wasn't doing it because I was trying to gain attention or any of that, any of those misconceptions that people thought about me. I was in my own rudimentary understanding as a kid was I only had a limited amount of time to be able to intake the information that I was seeking and express the things that I was thinking, learning, and feeling. Because as soon as I got home, then that opportunity was not available to me. Now, do not ever get any type of misconception about what I feel about my parents and my upbringing and whatever. I had a good life. I just was a different kind of kid, not just for my parents, but just for my family in general. I was just different. And so now that I do the things that I do and I've experienced life the way that I have, I can see now um, the benefits of those differences. So I say that because as a parent, you might want to take a step back and not do what I just expressed that a lot of companies do and expect all of your kids to communicate in the same manner. Don't suppress it. Now, trust me, it could be exhausting because remember, I have a lot of kids and they all, I was telling my daughter, my only girl, I was telling my daughter, I said, my goal when I had my first son was that I didn't want my household to be restrictive like what I grew up in. And so I wanted my kids to all have a voice, right? I wanted them to feel free to communicate in their own style and to know that they had a voice and that they would not be shunned or put down or mocked, anything about their questions, their concerns, or their thoughts. And so just probably a couple of months ago, I was talking to my daughter and I said, that was a goal of mine, but I think I did kind of too good of a job because y'all are the most um opinionated people I've ever met in my life. And she cracked up laughing. She was like, "We are, right?" She was like, "Good job, mom," because um everybody always notices that I am very confident in who I am and what I do and what I not arrogant but confident. She said, and I always tell him I attribute that to my mom. She taught me as a young lady how to speak clear and how to not shy away. And that, especially for her, because my daughter is over 6 feet tall. And I wanted her to understand at a very early age, do not curl your shoulders, do not shrink. I don't care if you are the tallest person in the room. Own that. Own that. Always own that. Never let anybody make you feel like that who you are and how you are is wrong. So that's just a little, y'all know me. That's just some insight from the corner of Dr. Michelle to help you. And again, I wanted to make sure that I really kind of clarified this extrovert process because it was something that was learning for me. And I had to really dive into my why. Why was that urge there? So in the workplace, maybe the person who is talking a lot has experienced some suppression somewhere in their life, and this is the only opportunity. Help them to better communicate, but don't shun them, please. Now that brings me to our neurodivergent individuals. They may communicate, process, or respond in ways that differ from traditional workplace expectations. Now, I didn't say traditional workplaces, it is their expectations. Some may need written instructions, extra processing time, direct language, reduced sensory distractions, or clarity around expectations. The goal is not to force anyone into one communication style. The goal is to create conditions where people can contribute effectively. Now, I want to pause here for another moment because this part of the conversation, my friends, is especially important to me. I have seen it. I have seen brilliant, capable, creative people be completely misunderstood, not because they lack talent, not because they lack commitment, but because the environment around them only recognize one version of communication, one version of focus, one version of professionalism, and one version of participation. And when that happens, companies do not just fail the individual, they lose access to wisdom, innovation, precision, honesty, creativity, pattern recognition, and problem solving that can make the entire organization stronger. Sometimes what looks like disengagement may actually be process. What looks like resistance may actually be a need for clarity. What looks like too direct may actually be honest communication without the extra layers people have been trained to expect. What looks like silence may be someone organizing their thoughts so they can respond with care and accuracy. This is why awareness matters so much to me. So much. And if a company only rewards the person who speaks first, responds fastest, networks easily, or performs confidence in the most familiar way, then the company may be overlooking extraordinary people who communicate, contribute, and create value differently. And to the leaders listening, supporting neurodivergent professionals does not always require complicated solutions. Sometimes it begins with simple but powerful adjustments. Provide written expectations. Give people time to process before requiring a response. Be clear about deadlines and priorities. Reduce unnecessary ambiguity. Allow different ways of participating in meetings and create space for honest conversations about what helps people do their best work. This also means training managers to recognize that fairness does not always mean giving everyone the same exact conditions. Fairness means giving people what they need to contribute effectively. Inclusion is not about asking people to become less of who they are so that the workplace feels more comfortable. Inclusion is building workspaces mature enough to receive the value people bring in different forms. Because when companies learn to embrace neurodivergent professionals, they are not lowering standards. They are expanding possibility. They are saying we are strong enough, wise enough, and human enough to recognize brilliance even when it does not arrive in the package we expected. Thank you for listening and allowing me to express that. Because when I say that this is very important for me, it is extremely important because in the world that we live in today, we have become desensitized from just simply being human beings. We mock people. We secretly record them having breakdowns so that we can get likes and views and shares on social media. We Now there are so many videos out there of people being physically attacked and beat down because somebody else came. We have to return back to a sense of care and responsibility, especially in the workplace. And I do not apologize for becoming emotional with this. Why? Because I need people to understand that this cannot be sustainable nor the way that we treat individuals. As I said in season one, when I started this podcast, we may not always agree, and I love a good debate, but what we will do and are capable of doing is to treat people like people. It doesn't matter what our race, what our size, how we communicate, what our skills are. Put people first, and you'll win every time. So, when we talk about different communication styles, we are not just talking about personality. We are talking about access, belonging, and whether workplaces are willing to see the full range of human talent in front of them. When workplaces only reward one communication style, They risk missing valuable insight. Strong leaders and strong teams learn how to listen for value in different forms. The person who speaks quickly, the person who follows up thoughtfully by email, person who asks precise questions, the person who notices what others missed, and the person who needs time to organize their ideas before responding. And this, my friends, is why communication matters more than titles. A title may put you in the room, but communication helps people understand why your presence matters. Titles. Let's talk about that. Titles can describe your role, or communication often determines your reach. People may not always remember every credential you have, but they often remember how clearly you explain a problem, how calmly you handle pressure, how respectfully you challenged an idea, or how effectively you helped a group move forward. In many rooms, communication becomes the bridge between what you know and what others are able to trust. When you communicate well, people begin to see your judgment, your preparation, your character, and your leadership potential. This week, I want you to think about one conversation that changed your career. Maybe it was feedback you received, an opportunity someone offered, a difficult conversation you finally had, or a moment when you found courage to speak up. I'm going to briefly tell you about my moment that I didn't know was a moment. I had a leader, her name was Sharon Becker, and she was the most pivotal transition to who I was into who I am now. Sharon was one of the most compassionate yet knowledgeable and experienced leaders I've ever had the opportunity to sit in front of. As compassionate as she was, she expected excellence. And I remember when she asked me to come over to supervise one of her departments that was out of control. And I didn't understand. I was like, but why? Aren't those the people that come to work at like 4 o'clock in the morning? And listen, I don't shy away from the fact I am not a morning person. I was like, you don't want to do that to them. And she said, I need the barracuda. She was the first one to coin that word. And not the barracuda in a bad way. She knew that I was one of the few people that took time to really understand SOPs, the uh, laws, the compliance, everything before I enacted or gave any type of direction to any team. I needed to know what I was doing, what they need to be doing, and how it affected the rest of the departments. It's always just kind of been a thing for me. And so when I got there, uh, there was two of us. There was two supervisors in that department. And so there was so many times that I came up to her because I wasn't used to co-leading. I came up to her. I was just frustrated because I could see what we need to do and how we need to do it to get there. But my co-leader did not see the same. And I didn't want to cause division within the department. And I remember one day I'm up in Sharon's office and I'm just all over the place. Remember, this is the pre me now. So I'm all over the place and I'm frustrated and I'm just venting, basically. And she let me do it. She just sat there with a smile on her face and she let me do it. And she said, here's one of the biggest lessons that I want you to take away from everything that you just said. And I said, okay, so now I'm waiting on this profound, like biblical statement. And what she said to me um, at the moment didn't really confuse me. I received it, but throughout the decades after, I recognized why she said what she said. And so the words that she said to me was, sometimes you have to give people a day to process. And I was like, what? Okay. Okay. And so, I walked away, but the way that she delivered that wisdom is how I deliver wisdom now. You give people enough of the wisdom for them to be able to implement it into who they are. Sometimes when you give directions and you give step by step instructions on how to, and this is what you better do, or what you take away the opportunity for that level of wisdom to actually stick and create lasting impact. She didn't over clarify. She didn't tell me what to do. She just gave me some advice. And throughout the time since I had the pleasure of working for her, I've seen that play out in so many other areas of my life, personally, professionally, maternally. I have adult kids. And so, sometimes you can give some advice, but don't push that. Let them sit in that. Let them be able to process it the way that they need to so that they can make better sense of it. And then it limits or minimizes the resistance for them to hear you. What was your conversation that changed your career? Inside of a Better Way of Earning community, I want to hear from you. Share your answer to this question and be able to see and hear from other people about what has impacted them. Here's the beauty of it: the more that we share about our own conversations, it very may well resonate or help clarify something for someone else in the feed. So let's communicate, let's share. I encourage you to join our community, A Better Way of Earning. I created this because I wanted to have a space where it is not just a one directional conversation. I want to be able to interact and hear from you. Let's open up these topics and discussions so that we can find a better way of earning for all of us. I also want to invite you to join us for A Better Way of Earning talk show, which is now live. This is another space where we continue these important conversations with people who are building, leading, learning, and creating impact in the same time. Our next guest is an entrepreneur, polished fashion model, brand ambassador, mentor, and community leader. His name is Stephen Goved, affectionately known as Mr. Goved. This episode airs Thursday, August 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The topic of our conversation is what happens when you bet on yourself. So you can catch it on our website. I will put the link in today's episode's description. Please join us. Please share this opportunity to hear with someone else in your ecosystem so that they also can learn. And I want to encourage, again, the continued conversation from both the podcast and the talk show. Every episode of A Better Way of Earning podcast and talk show is designed to do more than inspire. It's meant to start meaningful conversations about work, leadership, entrepreneurship, money, personal growth, and what success truly looks like in today's world. Our guests come from different industries and backgrounds, but they all have one thing in common. They share real experiences, practical wisdom, and lessons that can help us all build a better future. But here's what makes this community different: the conversation does not end when the episode does. This is your opportunity to ask follow up questions, share your own experiences, celebrate breakthroughs, learn alongside professionals and leaders who are committed to growing together. Whether you're launching your career, building a business, leading a team, changing industries, or simply looking for a better way, you belong there. After each episode, we will post a featured discussion question inspired by that week's guest. We invite you to share your biggest takeaways, answer the weekly question, ask questions you would love to explore further, encourage and learn from other members, invite someone who would benefit from the conversation. Your story, your perspective, and your experiences may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And as we close today's episode, remember this: communication is not about becoming someone you are not. It is about helping people understand who you are, what you know, and what you bring, and how, most importantly, you can contribute. The public playbook may tell you that good work will always speak for itself. Your success blockers may convince you to stay silent, wait until you feel ready, or borrow words that do not build your own skill. But the better way is to communicate with clarity, courage, and purpose. Because when you learn to communicate your ideas, your work, your boundaries, your questions, and your value, you, my friends, create visibility. You build trust, you increase influence, and you open doors that talent alone may not open. I want to thank you so much for joining me for another episode of A Better Way of Earning podcast, where work, life, leadership, and money come together, helping you build success on your own terms. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep communicating in a way that helps your value be seen, heard, and understood.